Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today I wanted to talk about the bond rings with skills. We are making another tier list. We are tiering the 28 bond rings with skills in Fire Emblem Engage. So this list is going to be including all of them. I'm still figuring out where I want to place some of them, and I don't even remember all of their abilities, but I have a wonderful spreadsheet here that has all of this information for me, and so we're going to talk somewhat theoretically, somewhat from experience. I've seen a number of these used, and having played the game several times, I understand what the use case would be. Understanding how to tier bond rings is difficult. One, they're always competing with emblem rings for slots. Two, if you have the DLC, then it's very unlikely that you'll even have the extra deployments for units that won't end up having an emblem of some sort, be it from the main game or from DLC. And three, most of these bond rings don't really offer anything that the emblems don't offer a better version. So basically, anything that's S tier is going to be reserved. Like S tier and top of A tier are reserved for things that only are unique to these bond rings. It would be really easy to put everything else in F tier, but I am going to try and stratify them a little bit based on how that ends up working. I'm also going to turn down this RuneScape chill beats because it's blaring in my ears. Without further ado, let's get on to it. First up, Sita. If foe initiates combat and user's HP is 50% or less, unit takes 50% less, takes 5 less damage. Flat damage reduction is great. Situational is a little problematic, not ideal. I think that in general it's not fantastic, but can definitely save you in a pinch, and every once in a while it can activate and then really reduce damage by quite a bit, especially on a higher defense unit. So I'm going to give it B tier. Also, as a note, all of these S tier rings, like every other S tier ring, give 4 effective stat increases, 4 increases to main stats, or hit point. If they increase hit points, they'll vary a little bit, because 1 step for hit points is +2 instead of +1, and 2 steps is +5 instead of +2, so I'm not necessarily rating them on their stats unless it becomes like really specific or relevant. This is mostly just their abilities. Navarre has Deadly Blade. When initiating combat with a sword, grants crit +10 during battle. I think that's pretty decent as well. Just flat +10 crit. It's on player phase and needs a sword, but honestly, you could do a lot worse as far as crit builds go. This is one of the ones that you can just kind of stick on a unit and let them go to town. Deirdre has Renewal, recovering 5 HP each turn. Debating to put this in A tier or S tier. I think it's a little bit more niche and it's not quite as impactful as some that I'd consider S tier, so I'm going to put it in A tier. But 5 HP flat recovery is pretty good, especially when it comes off of units like Chi Adepts for their Chain Guard. So if they get hit, they take a percentage of their max HP and damage, and your flat recovery can recover that back up, and if their max HP is low enough, that just gives them full HP. It's great. It's even useful on other units. Renewal is rarely a skill that people are over the moon about, but it's always a skill that finds some value. And so having Renewal, that's something most emblems can't do. Even something like Corrin only restores after you wait and restores you to your adjacent. So Renewal's a great, useful skill. Salif is C tier, battle-wise. Grants a stacking crit +1 each time the unit initiates combat and defeats a foe. Bonus lasts for the rest of battle, max +10. At best, he's basically Navarre that doesn't have to use a sword, but you're having to kill a unit every time you want the bonus to increase. Heck, I'm debating putting this into D tier. And then it restarts at the end of the battle. It's fun, it's flavorful. It's a reference to inheriting down a weapon that has 50 or more kills, so it gets crit stars on it. But in practice, it's just not really that reliable. Might put it C tier, depending on how much lower the rest of the skills are. Speaking of D tier abilities, Alm gets Wind Sweep. When unit initiates combat with a sword, foe might not counterattack, trigger percent is luck. If you're hoping on a luck percent trigger that only works on player phase, that your foe isn't going to counterattack you, you've got bigger problems. Yeah, I think that this deserves D tier, maybe even a lower tier if there are things between Salif and Alm. It's just unreliable, and when it does proc, it's not usually that game-breaking because you're not necessarily going to be using it all the time, hoping for it to proc. And if it does manage to like save your unit, it's because your unit was in a dire straight situation that wouldn't really be able to, they wouldn't be able to overcome otherwise, and you were trapped and just relying on hope-based plays. Mei's Great Thunder, on the other hand, I'm debating putting up into A tier. It's 20% extra damage when using Thunder, L Thunder, or Thoron. It is not a strictly worse version of Dire Thunder, which we'll get to, because it works with L Thunder and Thoron, and it works on enemy phase, and it has no restriction based on, like, there's no proc chance, it doesn't require enemy phase, player phase, whatever, it just requires you to wield some sort of thunder-based tome. And 1 to 3 range damage is huge. 20% damage, so the way this is calculated is it will add up your total damage from magic and your weapon, and any other bonuses you have. Then subtract the foe's resistance, and then add 20% on top of whatever, like, the end result of actual damage you would be dealing is. It's the same way that Astrostorm or Lodestar Rush work, that they take the damage that you would deal after defense or resistance and then divide, except in this time it's multiplying by 1.2. I think it's A tier. Might put it down to B tier, actually. Yeah, I think it's probably B tier the more I think about it, because on hard mode, I pumped a Lindworm Ivy full of all my Spirit Dust, gave her Mei, and she was barely one-shotting the things I needed her to with a Thoron. Granted, that Thoron wasn't completely forged all the way, but it was real close. So, the fact that was on hard mode, and then maddening enemies are even tougher, means that this is going to suffer. It still is a very useful ability. I think boosting thunder damage is huge, but I think that it's probably just B tier overall. Moving on to Makaya's. In fact, I'm just gonna drag these up so I can have them all on screen. And I'll do that in just a second, once I get Makaya's up. So Makaya first has Soth. I know this is FE9 version of Soth, sue me. Bane may reduce foes' HP to 1. Trigger percent is half of dexterity. Certain foes, like bosses, are immune to this effect. Reducing a foe's HP to 1 only, like, it sets up a kill, but it's so unreliable. It's a half dex proc. It's not ideal in any way. Also, hello, you may be wondering, why do I have a different version of Anna here? Well, it's because the version that I tried to take, the Heroes version, the image that I found, wasn't working, and rather than search online and try to find a better working version of the Heroes portrait, I just decided to grab another one. This is Hello Anna from Thracia. It still works. But yeah, Bane is not a good skill. Bane isn't even really good in Radiant Dawn when almost every other tier 3 skill is a guaranteed kill. Bane is a guaranteed not kill. And the fact that it is so unlikely to trigger, it's half of Dex. The highest Dex cap unit in the game, if I remember right, is Tamara at 50. Tamara would have a 25% chance to proc Bane, and then what? You're left with a foe on 1 HP. Sure, you can then feed it to someone else, but what if you proc Bane and then hit them again if you're doubling? Or what if you don't proc Bane? Then you can't necessarily feed that kill to someone else. Sometimes, when you're attacking, I don't actually know if this is true, but I vaguely remember in Radiant Dawn where if you attacked and would have killed, but proc Bane instead, you actually don't kill. I think that might be how it works in Engage, but I'm not sure. Either way, Bane is not a good skill, and Soth is therefore not an ideal S rank ring. Speaking of which, I'm adding a row below, which is called Mercy tier, which is where I'm putting Alencia. Mercy is... With Mercy, you will always leave your foe with 1 HP, no matter what. No matter how much overkill you're doing, no matter how many times you're hitting them, you will always leave them at 1 HP. You will never kill enemies. Mercy gets its own tier because, in the vast majority of cases, it is the worst skill imaginable. However, if you want to have a unit that is dedicated to setting up kills for other units, Mercy cannot be beat. It's just the absolute best thing at what it does. Mercy is the one with nothing of Fire Emblem skills. And if you don't understand that reference, watch Ristic Studies. It's a great YouTube channel. Up to Roy, we have Lilina. If unit uses Fire Hellfire Bolganon, deals 20% damage. Also up there with May. Fire spells are generally some of the best spells for outright damage. Because Thunder prevents you from doubling, and Wind is just kind of weaker, but still has similar weight and accuracy. So Fire spells just dealing extra damage is not bad at all. Generally, you'll have some other more useful emblem rings, like the extra magic boost from Celica, or the Byleth for Thrisis for +2 range, but plus 20% damage, once again, it's not bad. It's generally useful all the time. And Deke, I'm going to give Deke B tier, because he's decent at what he does. His ability is Strong Arm, gives you hit +20 when unit is equipped with a smash weapon. This is very, very useful on units like Armor Knights, who through the mid-game don't necessarily have the best selection of emblems to equip, but really want to have a smash weapon, especially like a forged Silver Great Axe, or even if you invest the money into it, Venomous. +20 hit is a lot, because those weapons generally are inaccurate. It's good for hitting smashes when you really want to knock something back and it really relies on that strategy. Also really good for just hitting with like a 50 damage truck. And it works on enemy phase just fine. All you need to do is be equipped with the smash weapon. Honestly, Deke might be one of the ones that I fish for on future Maddening runs when I'm planning on using Louis or Jade. Debating putting him in A tier, honestly, because that's just such a good effect. And on your Armor Knights, you don't really need other emblems. Like, there might be a place to use Roy on one of your Armor Knights, but outside of that, mid-game especially, like Soulmark, you want to have some good bond rings, and this is probably one of the best ones for an Armor Knight. High B tier. FE7... Oh wait, no, not FE7. This is over to Thracia, because this is Emblem Join Order. Finn gives Miracle. Avoids the foe's attack when it would be a lethal strike. Trigger percent equals luck, maxes out at 50. This is a C tier skill. When it activates, it's really nice, and sometimes, you know, you can't always count on it. You can't always count on it. You know, you cannot count on it, but it is a nice thing to have. You wouldn't plan on it, but it's really nice when it activates, gets you out of some binds. It's C tier. But now here we come to the juicy one. Olwyn's Dire Thunder. When initiating combat with Thunder equipped, unit attacks twice. This makes... So Thunder normally can't double. This gives Thunder a Brave effect. It only works on Thunder, it doesn't work on Elf Thunder or Thoron, but you can still forge a Thunder Tome and give it like a plus might engrave, or ideally a plus might and accuracy engrave, like the Thracia, the Genealogy engrave, Leaf's engrave, should be the Thracia engrave. Again, dumb decision. Works really well with Thunder because it gives it +1 might and +30 hit at the cost of like 2 weight, which who cares? Great combo. Just give Olwyn to a mage that you just want to have a Thunder Tome and otherwise just have a staff bot. So either a Sage, and this works great for Lindworm Ivy if you don't want to invest in her speed with Lyn or something. This works great basically to turn any one of your mages into a 1-3 range delete button on player phase. Makes them incredibly useful, makes them incredibly strong, really good boss killers, really good situational just removal, really, really good at killing Armor Knights, because a lot of times Armor Knights have enough HP that they'll survive a Thoron, like a big Thoron, but they won't survive 2 hits of Thunder, because their resistance is so low that you're getting all that magic hitting real strong. Great combo with Citrine, great combo really with any mage. Anna could use this pretty well, though Anna also has the speed to back up other sorts of builds. Great bond ring. Does something that the emblems don't. No emblem has a Brave Tome. Well, I was going to say that, and then I think Soren does. Was it a Brave Tome? No, it's something else. Either way. Great. Yeah, he has Bolting, which is not a Brave Tome, but thanks DLC. DLC privilege. Yeah, either way. Great. Whoops. I accidentally turned on my mouse controls. Great bond. You don't need to hear it from me anymore. Krom, Rightful Ruler, adds 5% trigger rate for all skills with trigger rates. C tier? It's not bad. Never bad to have an extra 5%, especially if you're really relying on stuff like Alchrist's Luna or Tamara's Sandstorm, or what other... Basically all the nobles have skills with trigger rates. This might be pretty good to throw on like a Hortensia for extra 5% trigger on World Tree. Ultimately, you can get better... Ultimately, there are better things to do with your ring slot, but extra 5%, it never goes amiss. Lissa is just heal touch. It's just 5 extra hit points to the target. If you really need that much healing that you're not able to just fully heal someone with a Men's Staff, and that extra 5 HP matters, I would almost say you have bigger problems, but you're giving up a ring slot for 5 hit points on your heal staffs. It's not terrible, but you can do a lot better. Ellie gives drawback, used to move 1 space away from an adjacent ally and pull the ally along. I am gonna debate on giving this A tier, because utility movement skills are great. You can't get this anywhere else. Real solid. But it is just kind of one of those that you're giving up a ring slot to have drawback. If you don't have anything else, it's a fine enough thing to have, but it's your ring slot, man. Be careful with that thing. Not having any combat buff means that this unit is relegated to a support position, and so maybe it might be useful on stuff like a Leer as a support bot, but we'll get into a better ring that you can use on a support bot Leer. Nino has Giga Excalibur. If unit initiates combat with Excalibur, not Wind, not Elwind, just Excalibur, deals 20% damage. I think because of the niche and because Excalibur is not actually that good of a spell, it's fine, but it's an A rank Wind Tome that does like an amount of damage between Elfire and Volganon and is still decently heavy. It's C tier. Like, what are you doing? Just run Lilina, or run Lilina and a Fire Tome. Don't run Nino. This is just for memes about doing high damage to Wyverns. And if you want a meme for dealing high damage to Wyvern, use Radiant Bow, Bow Knight Anna. That's what I have to say to that. Sorin Bond Ring. Not Sorin Emblem Ring, Sorin Bond Ring. If unit initiates combat with Wind equipped, unit may attack twice. Trigger percent is Dexterity. Excludes Elwind and Excalibur. So it's a brave effect, but it only works on Wind, the weakest tome in the game. It doesn't work on Elwind and Excalibur, and it's not even all the time. It's a Dex percent trigger. They really wanted to mirror Sorin's Adept as much as possible. And because of all those restrictions and limitations, and because potentially doubling with Wind is not nearly as impactful as doubling with Thunder, I give this ability C tier. I think it is not that good. It's fun when it's useful, but it's not good. Mia gives Shove. Push an ally with less build one space away. Also B tier. Movement skills are great. You can do a lot with Shove. But again, you're also giving up your ring slot for a utility skill in a game with really crunched deployment. Think about it. I'm sure that there are some cool strats you can do with Shove. Shove strats are always fun, are always cool, always come out and be pretty relevant, but it's not great. One moment, please. Sorry about that. Okay, we are almost through with these. We only have a couple left. So, Edelgard is next. Actually, I'm just going to put all these up here. Edelgard is next. We have Flickering Flower. If unit initiates combat, freezes foe. Trigger percent equals total damage dealt. So the idea is you hit with a big attack and deal a lot of damage, and then you don't kill the opponent, but you freeze them. But only sometimes. Yeah, I'm not really feeling this one either. It can work, it can help, but I don't like relying on such small percentage chances for such important things like freeze. Just why? Used to make an... Okay, Dimitri. Parceline. Used to make an attack against an adjacent foe, then move one space away from that foe after combat. So, it's another movement tool. It is... I'm debating whether it's on the same tier as Drawback and Shove. I think it's worse because you're not directly affecting another unit, it's only yourself. Something that I know, apparently, is that you can then canter afterwards, after the attack, so you can Parceline and then canter for, like, 3 to 4 spaces away, which is really helpful in certain circumstances, certain situations for hit and run. You know, you charge in with the flyer, make an attack, Parceline, and then canter away. It can work, it can function, but I don't feel like it comes up nearly as much, and that's requiring Canter or Canter Plus already. It's fine, but it doesn't really do a lot. And then there's Claude. +1 range with bows if at 100% HP. This is one that's a little bit more strategic than Dire Thunder in terms of where it's useful. Like, it turns your regular bows into longbows, and it turns your longbows into 4-range tools. You can't say it's bad. The restriction of having to be at 100% HP can make leveling up at an inopportune time annoying, but overall, extra range opens up so many different strategies that it is incredibly good and always worth at least a consideration, and in this case is definitely better than most of these other emblem rings, bond rings. Sorry, I took quite a bit of a break having to deal with some stuff. We are almost done though. Bushido Ryoma. If unit's level is higher than foes, grants crit plus 10 during combat, and unit deals 2 more damage and takes 2 less damage. So basically, if you have an over-leveled unit, this makes them even better. And then you can put your emblem on someone else. Honestly, a solid B tier skill. It's not bad. You know, +2 damage, -2 damage received, +2 damage dealt, -2 damage received, and crit +10. It's a better version of Navarre, and you get a mid-grade between like a Leer and Vale's personal skills. Honestly, a really solid ring. The only restriction being you have to outlevel the foe, so it might not always work on like bosses, and it requires you to have like one unit that's really dumped into, but that's generally a pretty commonly done thing in Fire Emblem anyway. I'd say it's a really solid ring. Xander then has Chivalry. If unit initiates combat with foe, has at 100% HP, unit deals +2 damage and takes 2 less damage. I'm not gonna say it's like D tier, but it's not great, because it's like, okay, it only works on player phase, so no enemy phase. It's a 2 damage dealt, -2 damage taken swing, which is meaningful. But because it's only on player phase, it only ends up really working on like bosses or units with multiple health bars, and only if you're the first person to attack them on that health bar. And just +2 damage dealt, -2 damage taken, while it can be significant, definitely, especially if you're hitting multiple times or getting hit multiple times, trying to avoid that, it can make the difference a decent number of times, but it's not as impactful as I think these other bond rings are. Okay, now we have the Sacred Stones emblem. Sure Strike. If unit initiates combat, attacks are guaranteed to hit, but trigger percent is dexterity. Once again, it's a weird trigger for a thing that doesn't end up being... Well, it's kind of like... Actually, I think it probably is C tier. It's like a poor man's Divine Pulse. It's just equal to Dex instead of equal to Luck plus 15 or 30. But that's not bad. Because it's equal to Dex, that means that units that have higher accuracy are going to, have guaranteed sure shot anyway. That said, for attacking enemies that are in, like covert enemies in cover, in high cover, or with some other weird avoid stacking, it can be meaningful. It's a random chance to hit, and I don't really like, relying on procs. But for what it's worth, it can be decent and it can be reasonable. And before we get into the Fey emblems, last one is Marisa Lethality. When landing a crit, instantly kill foe, 30% flat trigger chance, excluding certain powerful foes. Crits generally always kill the foe, but in this case, it's an extra 30% chance to trigger, and this reminds me of its use case is the same use case as Assassin Marisa in Sacred Stones, which is great, because Assassin Marisa can't deal damage by herself, but randomly gets one-shots with lethality. And so it's a 30% chance after you crit. That can come in surprisingly often with crit builds, because it's really easy to get a crit build to at least 80% crit. Some units can even bump that up to 90 or 100 quite easily with the right support, the right weapons, engraves, and all of that. And so giving them Marisa, you can either give them like Navarre to push it up to 90 to 100%, or you can give them Marisa to push it up, so instead of just doing extra chance to crit, you have an extra chance on top of the crit to instantly kill, which is really good on certain crit weapons with crit engraves that actually reduce the might but increase crit significantly. Again, it doesn't work on all enemies. It says excludes certain powerful foes, which I assume means bosses. Might mean certain mini bosses too. But overall, not a bad thing to have. Sometimes you really just need to roll and try to kill someone with a single unit. In that case, it works out. For the not DLC, for the Fire Emblem Heroes bond rings, real quick, Alphonse gives +2 attack to adjacent allies. Really good ring, A tier. Pairs really well on a Leer. So if you don't want to have a Leer be doing stuff with dragon typing and just want them as a support bot, this boosts their support effectively to +5 instead of +3. And other than that, just great overall for any sort of stacked thing, any sort of support botting, great overall. Serena, fortified defense, C tier. She's fine. Maybe B tier. +2 defense to adjacent allies for 1 turn at start of player phase. Yeah, that's B tier, because you can easily position yourself to make use of it. You get that bonus lasts for a full turn, and then you just reapply it to someone else. 2 defense, especially early game, is nothing to laugh at, and even later on it can be a difference maker. Something good to plan around. Just kind of a nice ring to have, nice bonus to have. And spur resistance on Anna. Once again, it's 3CA Anna, but the Fire Emblem Heroes Anna picture that I had didn't want to work. Spur resistance is +2 resistance to adjacent allies. That applies not at start of turn, but just passively, just kind of like Alphonse's spur attack. I think it's B tier because defense, with resistance particularly, it's a little bit more niche than attack, but it still can definitely be the difference between surviving and not, especially when you're getting attacked by multiple mages. So, great way to support an ally. Do I want to make any changes to these setups? If I did, I would probably be bringing these ones up, and I don't really feel comfortable doing that. And I don't really feel comfortable bringing any of these up to the same tier. So yeah, there we are. There's your tier list. Let me know what you think. Let me know what bond rings you've found use with. Until next time, this is Beth Rosaneth signing out.